Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is the Ukraine War news update, second part thereof for the 2nd of May 2025. It's crazy times in the world, very febrile, very volatile times. So much going on. I guess there always is, but I don't know, it just seems it's somewhat more volatile right now than I can remember it being. I'm going to start with Euroclear. This is the organisation that has jurisdiction over a vast majority of the frozen Russian assets. They are based in Belgium, and they have been under pressure, or the EU is under pressure to release these funds in totality to Ukraine so that they can have a huge pot to try and fight Russia with. At the moment, there's just the profits from the frozen Russian assets being ploughed back into paying off loans to Ukraine. So they're underwriting loans to Ukraine with frozen Russian asset profits. Anyway, Euroclear plans to seize and redistribute around 3 billion euros, $3.4 billion of Russian funds that are frozen in the Belgian clearing firm after Moscow grabbed investor cash in Russia. So they're not paying Ukraine because they've frozen these assets, and Russia has retaliated with freezing investors' cash in Russia. That money is going to be used to compensate Western investors, and I think this is the first time such a move has taken place. So that is happening. I don't know what the ramifications for that will be, but anyway, that's something to keep an eye on, I guess. EU plans its 17th sanctions package against Russia over the Ukraine invasion. The French Foreign Minister Jean-Noël Barrot says the EU will align both the substance and timing of the sanctions package with US efforts. Interesting. I might forward wind to look at some claims to do with US efforts. There are potential. So here, let's bring this forward then. So US officials have prepared a number of options for Trump to increase economic pressure on Russia. According to Bloomberg, Trump has not yet made a decision since diplomatic efforts are ongoing. I'm hoping there is a greater possibility that Trump will end up under pressure from maybe the Senate, putting sanctions on Russia. And if the EU is looking at timing their 17th sanctions package with US sanctions or moves, then that's a good sign, right? Viktor Orban, the Prime Minister of Hungary, has stated that the EU's policy of military support for Ukraine and Ukraine's accession to the community could lead to Europe's bankruptcy. Quote, European money is being transported to Ukraine on wheelbarrows, and the EU economy is facing a severe shortage of funds, he says. Of course, as a net, it's certainly not a net contributor to the EU. As a net cost, I guess, to the EU, I can't think of the word. Hungary is it's an interesting scenario where Orban's the one criticizing EU funding going to another country, to any country in particular. Now, talking of Viktor Orban, he's posted a photo shaking hands with the far-right Our Homeland Party leader, Laszlo Toroczkai. I don't know if that's Toroczkai, if that's a good pronunciation. Almost certainly not. Just a day after the party's May the 1st event featured Nazi salutes and symbols. Due to Orban's plummeting popularity, joining forces with extremists on the far right is becoming a real possibility. Interesting. Not a good sign there for politics in general in Hungary, but it is possibly a good sign that he is losing popularity enough to feel he has to go and hang out with these unsavory types there. Okay. Grzegorz Braun, the far-right Polish presidential candidate and sitting MEP, so he's a member of European Parliament, had his team remove a Ukrainian flag from Biała Podlaska's City Hall during a campaign rally using a ladder. He admitted ordering it, claiming full responsibility, and police are now investigating. I mean, it just goes to show that the far right, particularly the far right, now I know there are elements of the far left in some places. France is not supportive of Ukraine in the far left, but they're not so anti-Ukraine. I only really see this kind of behavior coming from the far right around Europe. And indeed, that's what we see in MAGA America more than sort of Antifa America, if you like. They won't be anti-Ukraine in a way that MAGA America is. And I think it is the far right that has the biggest propensity to be anti-Ukraine and pro-Russia. Certainly, we're seeing that around Europe more so. Israeli Airlines El Al resumes flights to Russia after a 4-month suspension, and that took place after that Azerbaijani aircraft was shot down during a drone attack, killed 38 people, and a lot of airlines pulled out of servicing Russia. That's, at least from this airline, is a reversal in their routes. Right. Germany's intelligence agency, this is pretty big, this. Germany's intelligence agency has officially labelled the far-right AfD party as an extremist threat, enabling expanded surveillance powers. Now, AfD has continued to grow in the polls. We had the recent elections where Friedrich Merz, with the CSU-CDU, has become the new chancellor, right? But his popularity has plummeted. Partly, they say, because of the debt break thing. Actually, I don't think people are worried about that. But partly in going back on certain things, there's immigration. But having to get into bed with the SPD in Germany as a coalition. So you've got the left and the right getting into bed together. They are going to be compromises that he's going to have to make. And when you've got the chomping at the bit from the far right, if you're going to compromise on things that the far right over there are particularly concerned about, then you will get a leakage of voters and sentiment from the centre-right party, the kind of establishment party, the CDU, over to AfD. So AfD actually still continuing to grow in popularity. So it's fascinating that they've now been able to be labelled an extremist threat. So let's get some detail on this. Kyiv Independent reports Germany's domestic intelligence agency has officially classified the Alternative for Germany AfD party as, quote, confirmed right-wing extremist organisation, according to Der Spiegel today. Until now, only AfD's regional branches in Thuringia, Saxony and Saxony-Anhalt held that status, while the National Party had been under observation as a suspected extremist group. The Federal Office for the Protection of the Constitution finalised the designation after compiling a report exceeding 1,100 pages, which outlined extensive evidence of extremist activity within the party. The new classification does not ban the party, but grants security services greater powers to monitor it through intelligence methods. These include wiretapping communications, recruiting informants, and tracking finances more aggressively. AfD has long campaigned on opposition to immigration and criticism of European integration, while consistently advocating rapprochement with Russia. The party opposes military aid to Ukraine, calls for lifting sanctions against Moscow, and has repeatedly urged for the resumption of trade relations. Concerns over the AfD's ties to authoritarian regimes deepened after multiple senior members came under investigation for suspected collusion with Moscow and Beijing. Co-leaders Tino Kruppala and Alice Weidel have both travelled to Russia in recent years, and in May 2023, Kruppala and party founder Alexander Gauland attended a reception at the Russian embassy in Berlin celebrating Russia's Victory Day. The AfD's stance aligns with that of Germany's left-wing populist BSW party in calling for peace talks over military support to Ukraine. Lawmakers from both parties walked out of the Bundestag during President Zelensky's speech on June 2024. After President Trump's return to the White House, the AfD secured a key ally in Washington. Billionaire Elon Musk, one of Trump's top supporters, publicly endorsed the party, calling it Germany's last spark of hope, despite long-standing accusations of Nazi sympathies among its ranks. In the most recent German federal elections, the AfD captured 20.8% of the vote, consolidating support in parts of the former East Germany where the party's long held a foothold. I'm going to give you a little bit of a very quick analysis on local elections in the UK, where Reform have just romped it as expected. And there's definitely a similarity with AfD growing, Reform growing in the UK, with all of the Rassemblement National in France, MAGA in the US. It's all part of the same thing. Establishment politics is losing out to populist, simplistic rhetoric that's basically unable to answer the complex problems that they're seeking to answer. But there's political ignorance that means that you vote for anti-establishment parties that say, yeah, we're going to rock it up, we're going to make all these changes, we're going to burn it down. And of course, actually, are they really responsible governors of looking after the best interests of the country, really? And you look at what Doge is doing, you look at what the MAGA Republicans are doing at the moment, and I'd argue clearly not, although they're able to sell that to their base because their base exists in an immediate ecosystem that doesn't see outside of that bubble. But anyway, those are larger geopolitical movements in the world that are being reflected in every single election going on in the democratic world. And unfortunately, these populists really don't have democracy at the heart of what they are looking out for, really, at the heart of what they're doing. Okay, anyway, let's get back to it. A 59-year-old Georgian-born house painter has been arrested in Greece for spying on NATO ops in Alexandroupoli. For 6+ months, he's filmed military shipments, says Null reports, especially to Ukraine, for a suspected GRU contact in Lithuania. So GRU being the military intelligence of Russia, or is that foreign intelligence? Recruited in 2024, he claimed he'd help the motherland for any price. So good that he's been found out, but it just goes to show how much of this stuff is probably going on. Now, a little bit on China. Chinese soldiers, as you can see from this video has been doing the rounds. They've been practicing doing their parade ahead of the Victory Day parade in Moscow. Chinese soldiers are already marching in Moscow's parade rehearsal, officially neutral, scare quotes neutral, but enemies in disguise, says Null reports. Xi Jinping is expected to attend the May the 9th event, marking 80 years since World War II victory. The Chinese in the heart of Russia, they're giving a military parade of sorts. Not a huge contingent there, but certainly meaningful. Now, Russia and North Korea have begun reconstruction of a road bridge across Russia's Tumen River. It's scheduled for completion in 18 months. Russian Prime Minister Mishustin has called it truly landmark for bilateral relations, which have already led to North Korean troops fighting alongside Russian forces in Ukraine. I mean, this is a normalization of North Korea. This is an acceptance of North Korea's brutal regime, and this is getting into bed with them because they really, really need them. Absolutely incredible stuff there. Now, Trump appears to have just cut off all trade and business with China. This is a Truth Social post from yesterday afternoon US time. He said, alert, all purchases of Iranian oil or petrochemical products must stop now. Any country or person who buys, all caps, any amount of, all caps, oil or all caps, petrochemicals. So any country or person who buys any amount of oil and petrochemicals from Iran will be subject to immediately secondary sanctions. They will not be allowed to do business with the United States of America in any way, shape or form. Thank you for your attention to this matter, President Donald J. Trump. Right, just to let you know that Trump says that any country that buys anything from Iran will not be allowed to do business with the US, but China imports approximately 90% of Iran's oil exports. This is, I mean, you can totally agree with this. I'm not out of hand being anti-Trump here, but just to let you know, that's not just putting tariffs on incoming Chinese goods. That is sanctions. It depends how you interpret. They will not be allowed to do business. Well, no, actually, in any way, shape, or form. That is 100%. You can, if Donald Trump is being serious there, they will no longer be able to do any business with China. That is all business with China stopped. Of course, yeah, that's free trade out the window. But you can argue that's a good thing. But if you thought the trade war with China was bad, technically, either he's lying, being bombastically irresponsibly bombastic, lying, or he's serious about actually starting the mother of all trade wars with China. So you thought it was bad before? Well, that should mean something, right? Now, staying on China, the US has begun sharing some of its most sensitive intelligence on Chinese and Russian space operations with Britain and the Five Eyes nations. So that's UK, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and of course the US. Until this month, the activity of Space Delta 9, a unit focused on America's orbital warfare, was largely deemed US eyes only. However, US military chiefs have taken the unprecedented step of allowing UK military leaders to observe their work at Shriver Space Force Base in Colorado in light of mounting concern about China's militarization of space. That's being reported in the Times. Now, again, staying on China, TikTok has been handed a €530 million fine for sending users' data to China in a ruling that social media groups said would have negative ramifications for any company in Europe with global operations. Well, here is the EU being hard on these massive tech corporations. And of course, that will have an impact on Elon Musk and Twitter or X. And then all of those other big tech firms that are hoping to muscle into the EU, hoping that the regulations won't be forthcoming. Well, actually, the EU is swinging a club at a lot of these entities, and they're not afraid to flex here. So I think that's good. I think these big tech firms are at the moment doing things unconstrained with our data, and it's really good to see the EU flex there. Now, Zelensky said he's spoken with Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney, congratulated him and the Liberal Party on their victory in Canada's federal elections. They discussed steps that could bring closer the Ukrainians closer to peace. They also talked about cooperation with the Coalition of the Willing. Canada could well be a very important member of the Coalition of the Willing, sending troops to Ukraine, putting them on the ground with France, with the UK. There's a close relationship with the UK, obviously Canada, and the monarch being head of state, and with France, and you got Quebec. So, UK and France being the critical members of the Coalition of the Willing is going to play well, I think, with Canada, and I think Canada could be a really useful ally there. I was going to play you some of this BBC interview actually, with Mark Carney after the post-election interview that was really good. Demonstrates so clearly that PM's more than ready to lead, not just in resisting Trump, not just leading Canada, but also in the imminent global trade and diversification restructuring. Exciting times ahead for Canada, some might argue. I've been to the White House. I've seen it. I've seen all the monuments, so I'm not going as a tourist. I'll go when there's a serious discussion to be had. Yes, the president has his territorial views. That's never, ever going to happen when it comes to Canada. So Mark Carney being very strong there. Now, Alexander Dugan, that genocidal ultra-nationalist philosopher from Russia, whose thinking underwrites Putin's own thoughts and writing and policy on Ukraine, amongst other things, has got really annoyed with Canada voting for Mark Carney. So you can be guaranteed that was the right decision, is my position. Election of ultra-globalist, woke, liberal, US-phobic Mark Carney in Canada is declaration of war to Trump. So it would be rather easier geopolitical necessity of assuring northern territories multiplied by ideological opposition to Trumpism. Canadians equal Ukrainians. Alexander Dugan showing that he's a big fan of Trump, wants Trump to succeed. Carney winning is anti-Trump, so it's therefore bad. Carney winning is all woke liberalism, even though Carney distanced himself quite cleverly from the more divisive politics, identitarian politics. And Carney here saying that Canadians are functionally equivalent to Ukrainians. I mean, wow. Dr. Ian Garner says, we pissed off an actual fascist. Well done, Team Canada. Just incredible rhetoric there from Alexander Dugan. Now, the White House is unsure how to proceed with Russia after the conclusion of the rare earth deal with Ukraine, says Politico. White House has also no consensus on what will happen next. Honestly, I've just done a whole video on the US economy and tariffs and the GDP contracting. And part of the the story there is there's a complete lack of vision and coherent sense of what the US is trying to do economically. It's just all over the shop. Yes, tariffs, but really there's not a very sensible approach to economics. And when you don't have a clear vision, this is the case with doing trade deals with the US. You can't do trade deals with someone else who doesn't really know where they're at. They don't really know what they're trying to achieve. It's just complete chaos. Now, actually, I think that the same can be said about Ukraine. We're hearing so many different views from all these different players. You've got Mike Walls has been kicked aside to be downgraded to the UN ambassador to the UN, sorry. And you've got Marco Rubio taking over as Secretary of State, taking over in the interim as National Security Advisor. You've got him saying stuff. You've got Tammy Bruce, his spokesperson, not even knowing that he'd been put into that position and being told in a press conference by journalists that Marco Rubio was now National Security Advisor. You've got Keith Kellogg saying different things to JD Vance saying different things to Marco Rubio saying different things to Mike Wall. It's just chaos. So when we hear here, I mean, I know it's Max 24 interpreting Politico, but when we hear White House also has no consensus on what will happen next, this could entail difficult decisions, including directly pressuring Russia, which Trump has been reluctant to do so far. Yeah, I think there is no consensus. I would like to see Trump, as we talked about earlier, putting sanctions on Russia, but, who knows whether that will happen. It should happen. It should have happened frickin' 3 months ago. Now, David D., a Republican at heart, said this is big. The State Department reported that the United States is relieving itself of its obligations as a mediator on Ukraine. State Department, the United States will no longer be mediators in the dialogue between Russia and Ukraine. Now, this is taking Tammy Bruce, again, the spokesperson for the State Department, saying this. And there are some newspaper articles that I think are possibly overreacting to this. You could interpret this in two ways. So what she said, is Trump backing out? The US will no longer act as a mediator in efforts to end the war in Ukraine, says State Department spokesperson Tammy Bruce. Quote, we'll continue to help, but we won't be flying around the world to mediate every meeting. It's now up to the two sides. Some are saying this is declaration that the US has pulled out of peace negotiations. This is potentially massive. But then you could interpret this as just, we're not going to go to every meeting. Look, you guys are going to have to sort some of this out yourselves. We're not going to be the mediator. But actually, that's what you wanted to be, because you went from being on Ukraine's side to saying, right, we're going to be the neutral mediator. Now you got pissed off because Russia won't do what you want and can't do what you want. Russia won't do what you want, and then Ukraine can't do what you want because what you want crosses obvious red lines that have been in there for a long time, and some things that you want are unconstitutional. So you've come to the realization that actually you want Russia to get what they want, because that opens trade relationships back up again. But you understand that's pragmatically unrealistic, and that leaves you at a complete impasse. And now that's annoyed you, so you're just going to get out of Dodge. Well, that's what happens when you side with the guys who want completely unrealistic and morally reprehensible things to take place. So this is what she has to say.
The first row.
Something that's just come out from the president.
Yeah. All right, great.
Oh, sorry. No, actually, we're not going back to the part. No, that was. I'm not going to play you that. That's the part of the presser where she found out that Marco Rubio was now the National Security Advisor from the press corps. And that's just really embarrassing. It just shows the chaos that's taking place. People are just being put into positions without anyone in the administration knowing. It's just like phoned in. Can you send Mike Walls a quick email to say we sacked him, and then can you copy in Marco Rubio on that and say we put him into his position? Let's just leave it at that, rather than actually these things being done like properly across departments. Now, JD Vance has said there is a very large gap between Ukraine and Russia and how they see the end of the war. Yeah, no shit, Sherlock. It's just like, there's just a huge difference between how Ukraine and Russia see the end of the war. Yeah, Russia see the end of the war as Ukraine being completely captured and decimated, and a complete change complete change of administration there. and they see the Russian army marching all the way to the western borders, and Ukraine, they don't quite see it like that. Who knew that they would have that there would be a very large gap between Ukraine and Russia and how they see the end of the war? Oh my God. And therefore, the Trump administration will work to try to bring these sides closer together over the next 100 days. So hang on, we just had Tammy Bruce saying we're pulling out as being mediators, and JD Vance is saying we're going to bring them much closer over the next 100 days, which goes against Trump saying we're going to finish this in 24 hours. Like, the lack of consistency across these voices is insane. Trump's team has drafted options to pressure Russia into ending the war, according to Bloomberg. Meanwhile, and again, that goes back, that's the kind of sanctions option. Meanwhile, US Secretary of State Marco Rubio says, quote, Ukraine won't retake 2014 lines and Russia won't conquer all of Ukraine. Okay, well, stop talking and do something. Yeah, okay, that may be. But do you know what? How about putting some sanctions on Russia, and how about continuing to support Ukraine with weapons? Then Russia would have capitulated, is my opinion. State Department's Tammy Bruce rebuffs Kremlin's claim that Ukraine will soon vanish, calling Ukraine a friend. US partnership beyond just minerals strengthens security for both, and Trump's deal signals deep economic ties and US commitment to Ukraine's recovery. So now we have the rhetoric from Tammy Bruce, the spokesperson for the State Department, saying that actually we're friends with Ukraine and that there's a US partnership over this minerals deal, whereas previously you just wanted to be neutral mediator. Like, what is going on? Everyone's all over the place. I'll tell you who is being consistent, though. Fricking Tucker Carlson, who says absolute rampant nonsense and disgusting rhetoric like this.
I mean, I'm frustrated because I think
Megyn
Zelensky
Kelly
is an enemy of the United States. And I think his government has tried to assassinate a number of people. I don't think that I know that.
No, well, prove it.
People
Prove it.
who are well known on the conservative side. So I think it's a really, really dark
Prove it.
government. It's banned the largest Christian denomination in Ukraine.
No, it's banned the Russian Orthodox Church in Ukraine because it is acting as a proxy for the Russian government and is harboring spies and so on and so forth. You are just completely mischaracterizing everything that's going on here.
That has sold a lot of the weapons that we have sent them to all kinds of dark groups, including Hamas and the Mexican drug cartels. Like, I think it's an outlaw government.
Lies. And that's why RT, Russia Today, are regurgitating this. You are a spokesperson for Vladimir Putin, and you are a terrible, terrible, terrible human being.
Government that does not represent Ukrainians. He's not an elected president.
Yes, he is.
He has no moral claim to run that country at all.
Yes, he has.
So, I mean, I'm frustrated.
And he's way, way, way more popular than your mate Donald Trump. So do you know what, mate? Cough. Just go. You can cough off. You can Steve Witkoff off. Now, talking of Steve Witkoff, possibly touted as a replacement, long-term replacement for Mike Waltz as a national security advisor. Remember, that's a position that had 6 different people in it in Trump 1.0. Already he's got rid of Mike Waltz, moved him sideways and down. Laura Loomer is apparently claiming she's behind the terminations of Mike Waltz and Alex Wong, his deputy. In the most dangerous geopolitical climate of our lifetime, says John Jackson, we put absolute clowns at the helm. Anyone who thinks this will end without a tragedy is deluding themselves. We all pay for this. Laura Loomer then had said, a scalp. So she says she's taken that scalp. Additionally, Alex Wong served as a foreign illegal, blah, 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 slags off Alex Wong. Yeah, she's taking responsibility for that. In the same way she took responsibility for getting rid of 6 people within the national security setup. Previously, when she went for that meeting in the White House with Donald Trump, and then the next day, a load of them were flushed out. She is dangerous. Dangerous. She's a right-wing extremist, nutjob, conspiracy theorist person who... Like, it's unsurprising now that these people are kicking around the White House and influencing. Tucker Carlson's another one. Donald Trump Jr. is another one. Stephen Miller's deputy policy director, and he's an absolute fascist. I mean, gee whiz, it's terrible. Trump announces Waltz is going to become his next pick to the ambassador to the United Nations. He says in this Truth Social post, and then says in the interim, Secretary of State Marco Rubio will serve as national security advisor while continuing his strong leadership at the State Department. So he's doing both. Wow. And you wonder whether he's actually lining up Marco Rubio for a fall there. But there are Republicans who are kicking back at this. Here's a video of GOP for Ukraine. So Republicans who are for Ukraine.
I could have made a deal for Ukraine that would have given them almost all of the land.
And you've got this isn't the actual video, this is just 41 seconds, but you've got a whole bunch of Republicans who are fed up with this, saying, I'm very disappointed in the way that Republican Party is currently handling the situation in Ukraine. Not supporting Ukraine would be turning our back on our ally. It never entered my mind that anybody, certainly not a Republican president, would be an apologist for Putin and for Russia. So on and so forth. So there are these people. I support aid to Ukraine because it's the right thing to do, says this Republican. So there are obviously, and there are many of you in my viewership who are Republicans, who are strong supporters of Ukraine. Some of you still hold on to, I guess, that Trump is all right and is going to be okay. But I guess both for Ukraine and for the country in general. Some of you have rejected Trump but hold on to your old school republicanism. There are all sorts of different flavors. I would argue that Trump is clearly wrong for Ukraine. If he ends up getting there eventually, at what cost? At what cost? It's already terrible. He can't turn this around. So he can turn around the eventual outcome in terms of, like, if he suddenly puts sanctions on Russia and then gives aid to Ukraine, everyone will be like, amazing, Trump, well done. But actually, that time period of the 3 months here and the 7 months of aid not going to Ukraine back at the beginning of 2024 is caused the death of Ukrainians, and you can never get that back. So even if he gets there eventually, it would have been terrible. He should have done it straight away, and he shouldn't have put a kibosh on the appropriations bill for 7 months. So Trump will never gain real decent plaudits for doing whatever he ends up doing with Ukraine. If he ends up doing the right thing, it'll be at the expense of lives initially, and he, getting there. If I'm a Nazi person who's been in charge of gassing like 1 million Jews, right? And then I end up realizing my ills and then doing the right thing, or maybe not even realizing my ills, but accidentally or just for some other reason turning things around. Like, if you look at the whole of, yeah, well done for getting in the end, but all of that period there, that's horrific, right? And when we look at your whole journey there, that is a terrible journey. Like, we'd much rather you've been at your endpoint right at the beginning, and that's what good people do, right? So we understand that supporting Ukraine, like you and I as supporters of Ukraine, we understand that supporting Ukraine from an American presidential point of view should have entailed sanctioning the crap out of Ukraine from January the 20th onwards and giving as many weapons to Ukraine as possible. I would actually say at that point it would be more important to sanction them, so that wouldn't have been militarily escalatory. I would have, but at the very minimum though, sanction them and keep that the PDA the Presidential Drawdown Authority, like, it is still has $3.8 billion of aid that could be given to Ukraine. That's not being given. How can you say, well, you cannot maintain that Trump has been good for Ukraine? That's for sure. Right. Apparently, he's planning, Trump this is, a $50 million military-style birthday parade, complete with 6,600 troops, 150 plus vehicles, 50 helicopters, and 7 marching bands. At the same time, he cancelled funding to feed starving children through the USAID program. For the cost of this ego fest, we could feed 1 million kids for an entire month. Who looks at the trade-off and says, yeah, that's leadership? Well, Trump does. So this is coming from, I think, Associated Press. I saw this in a few places. Genuinely, it appears he, and we know that he loves military parades. He saw them in one in Paris and said we need to do that in the US. He's been a fan of them around the world, often with kind of dictatorial nations doing these sorts of things. He loves a military parade. He wants his own. He would happily spend $50 million on that, but cut $50 million to the USAID budget. Of course, it's all about him. Now, Trump makes a trade deal with the UK, second order priority and a blow to ministers. We've been hoping to be up there, getting a decent trade deal. We're only on a 10% margin though, but we have been put into second or third tier negotiations, and those from sort of UKIP reform areas thinking, yeah, we can get out of Europe and we can get these amazing trade deals with everyone around the world from outside of the biggest trading bloc as a minnow. We can get these amazing deals. Well, we still haven't got one with the US, and that's 9 years after Brexit, and now we've been relegated to tier 2 or tier 3. It just, it's not looking good for us, and in terms of at least a US trade deal. Now, in the UK, we've just had some local elections. They've not been fully widespread across the UK. Only in certain areas have been these local elections. But the results are coming through. And essentially, Conservatives, mainly the Conservatives, but also Labour, have been absolutely shellacked. And Reform have won out. So this is AfD, Rassemblement National, Reform. Now, I know I'm going to have some Reform viewers, and you'll be absolutely unaccepting of my claim that they are equivalent to the AfD and Rassemblement National, but I would say they are. I'd say they are mainly working class, but not entirely. Populist politics against the establishment. But the problem is, Reform have got away with not being able to have a serious policy platform and a costed policy platform, because they've just been opposition, but fringe opposition, so they can promise the world and not have to deliver. We're going through an interesting period now where they are going to have to deliver. They've only ever had control of one council previously, and they bankrupted it, right? So now we've got all these local elections, and you've got a whole bunch of Reform councillors, and some of them being right-wing nuts, a whole bunch of Reform councillors being voted in. You have now 6 council control changes in favour of Reform. That is unbelievable. They've gone mainly from Conservative to Reform, as Conservatives are fracturing. However, they are also taking Labour votes as well, big time. And Labour will see particularly their working class vote. And now Labour's initial bedrock base was working class. They were representing trade unions and Labour. But as trade unions have kind of dissipated, and consecutive governments have de-unionized, particularly Tory governments, then the base is stretched out into kind of middle class lefties, people sort of like me. I'm not a Labour voter, I'm a anyone but Tories voter. So I voted personally, I voted for Labour, Lib Dem and Green, and I'm not beholden to any of them particularly. I'm a very practical voter and trying to put my vote into a pot where all of these are somewhat acceptable. But so what Labour's had to do is skew to the right, because they've seen Reform coming after them. So Labour, since they've got in, they've had 9 months of doing some pretty unpopular things as they have tried to get the burgeoning welfare state under wraps. But that's been, you've got this weird situation where they've done exactly what Reform voters would have wanted them to do in trying to get the welfare state under control, but that's been unpopular, like winter fuel allowance and disability benefit and all these kind of things. They're trying to control a bit better, but it's been really, really unpopular. And then, so the sorts of people that wanted Reform to do that, or the Conservatives to do that, have then been beating Labour over the head, because Labour have actually gone and done that, because there's no money left in the pot. There's absolutely massive financial black hole. So Labour in this no-win situation, which is when they skew to the right, they still get hit. And if they skew to the left, they they lose that centre vote back to Conservatives or to the Lib Dems. Lib Dems have been and Green have been getting away. As you can see there, they've had some gains here, and these are just early doors. It's 12 out of 20, so only half of the stats coming in. Not huge amount of local elections, but anyway, this is a massive sign of where the UK is going. My prediction is that Reform are going to absolutely tonk the crap out of Conservatives in the next election, and Labour. And Labour are going to have to consider doing a progressive alliance with the Lib Dems and Greens. That would be my opinion. Now, you can see Devon, Conservatives losing to no overall control, as Lib Dems have gone up, but Reform have gone up massively. Reform in Durham, right? Look at Labour. Look where Labour has gone in Durham. This is absolute shocker. So Labour going down to 4% in Durham, and Reform going from 4% to 66%. That is one of the most incredible results. So it's not just a problem for Conservatives. They have totally split the Conservative vote, and they are going to decimate local Conservative councils. But they are seriously hammering Labour as well. So this is there's a by-election, so this is the only MP. This was just how it happens that there was a by-election, so a special election when an MP's died or quit or something's happened or been kicked out. So in Runcorn and Helsby, which is a Labour Labour 52.9%, in first past the post, that is a massive victory, right? We don't have proportional representation. Reform were on 18%, Conservatives on 16%. Reform are now gone up to 38.72. Labour went down to 38.70. They lost that by 6 votes. 6 votes. But look at the movement there. So this is huge. Today is huge. Reform are massive winners. Look at the colour of these councils. Reform are really gaining. Sometimes Lib Dem are gaining, because they are being seen as a viable alternative to Labour. So if you're still left wing but annoyed with Labour, you are more likely to jump to Green or Lib Dem. Lib Dem are kind of middle class, centre left, centrist. So you'll get some of that movement. But we are now living, even in a first past the post electoral system, the UK is now living in a multi-party country state of affairs, and that's not a bad thing. I think that's more representative. You are going to find a party that's more representative of you, but do not for a second think that Reform is a coherent party. I think this largely shows, with a lot of voters, a bit of political ignorance, like not just thinking, I'm fed up with politics, I'm fed up with the existing parties, so therefore I'm going to vote Reform. Reform becomes a protest vote, but no one really quite understands what Reform stands for. Of course, they're going to be anti-immigrants, but yeah. Anyway, so much more to say about that. That's my tuppence halfpenny on that one. Chris O'Wiki here says Trump is on the verge of destroying the electoral fortunes of another Conservative party in the English-speaking democracy. So where there have been these threats, so you've got the threat of kind of MAGA populism, if you like, rising everywhere. And that's what's happened with Reform, I think. It's largely, partly underwriting what's going on there, and in Germany and in France and elsewhere in Europe. And it was going to happen in Canada until Trump personally basically started a war against Canada by saying they're going to be the 51st state. And because Trump said that, it flipped that MAGA vote back from going from Maple MAGA, Pierre Poilievre in Canada, to supporting the Liberal Party because Trump got involved too much. Now, in Australia, although Trump hasn't got involved in Australia, you've got the political party, the Conservative Party there, the actually Liberal Party there, being much more pro-MAGA and having like make Australia great again. And since Trump has become internationally very divisive and very unpopular in certain places, if you had associated with Trump very openly, then actually that is now hurting you politically. That happened in Canada, and it might happen in Australia. So the final MRP poll, these are good polls. a very complex way of finding out how things are going to go more regionally. In 2025 Australian election, which are they voting? Are you guys voting tomorrow, is it? In fact, which might almost be today, as you guys are 12 hours ahead. So it has the Labour having an 18-seat majority, which is up from the 7-seat majority of 2022. So wow, that's fascinating, and that could be a reaction against Trump. But outside of those two particular situations, where actually Anthony Albanese has come across a lot better more recently, he's done some good interviews. He seems like a really decent human being, and actually, is it Durant, the guy against him, has not come across so well, and yeah, I think associating more with Trump might cost him. But outside of that, we've got a much, I think, bigger issue worldwide, with right-wing populist parties really gaining an awful lot of traction. So there's a range of results here. High to low probability of Labour still winning, but with a hung parliament, still a slim possibility. Central projection of YouGov's Australia MRP shows the primary vote shares for both the main parties down since the last election, so maybe going to other parties, independents, One Nation, and I think you get the Teal as well over there, the Teal independents. So these guys are conservatives. A Teal independents, your moderate conservatives, who are a bit like maybe people who would go to Lib Dem in the UK from if the Conservatives were going too much towards reform and wanting to get together with a reform, they go off and either form their own, or this is the problem in the UK. The Conservatives are wondering whether to get into bed with the reform or not at the moment, and that's an identity crisis they're having, and it's going to be whether they want to adhere to ideology or how do you get into power. And if it's how do you get into power, they'll get into bed with the reform. If it's about the ideals of conservatism, then they won't get into bed with the reform, because reform are populist, and actually some of their policies are all over the shop. Some are left, some are right. They've just changed on, say, nationalising steel reform. And now, anyway, so I think the Teal independents in Australia, but I could be wrong. I'm no expert on them at all. Interesting that it's looking like you could get a Labour government getting re-elected, but it could be really, really close there. Okay, what else? No, that shouldn't be there. So, last thing I'm going to say is on global press, and I often talk about sitting in our little information bubbles, and we're all victim to this. But I think it's not just sitting in an algorithmically produced bubble or manipulated or informed bubble, but also having state actors destroying our press freedom. Russia doing that, but actually the US. So the World Press Freedom Index ranking has the US tumbling in terms, it's hit a record low according to the latest World Press Freedom Index. Press freedom in the US is not looking good, and the stuff that Trump is doing at the moment is making matters worse. You see his taking people to court, suing CBS. You've got and Paramount as their parent company. You've got the ABC with George Stephanopoulos. You have Amazon genuflecting to Trump with the Melania documentary and $40 million, but then also he owns Washington Post, and Washington Post has refused to endorse a candidate because they wanted to bend the knee to Trump. And so it's just all very worrying in the United States. Well, the global press freedom enters a difficult situation due to financial and propaganda pressure, according to Reporters Sans Frontières, so Reporters Without Borders, the same organization, or the equivalent organization of Doctors Without Borders, or Médecins Sans Frontières. The index highlights an unprecedented economic crisis across independent outlets in Europe, worsened by the collapse of American aid and the spread of Russian propaganda. Things are not looking good for press freedoms, and we also just have a lack of economic positive outlooks for press organizations. As we start getting more and more of our news from people like me, aggregators like me, but also just little organizations around, say, the internet, will stop supporting mainstream media and, importantly, local media. And the problem there is that we need mainstream media to go out and do the job of boots on the ground reporting. And we need them to do investigative journalism, and we need local media to do investigative journalism. But with the death of print media and the death of advertising revenues for these organizations, then they're scaling back, and you've got this plurality all over the place. But actually, it might not be good for journalism in the long run that is the state of affairs. And then, by the way, when you go to the White House, what they've done there, they've had 3 days in a row of not having mainstream media in and allowing just their little right-wing influencers in there. I'm going to do that on my next US videos. And the way that in fact, I'll leave you with this then. This should give you a kind of understanding of why we are seeing a press freedom situation in the US that's not good. So you've got, like, here 3 days in a row, I think it was, you just had a cabal of influencers. Let me get this straight. The White House kicked out Associated Press and has now invited Dom Lucre to take part in White House press briefings. For those who don't know, Dom Lucre is a guy who was suspended by Twitter for reportedly posting screenshots from a notorious child sex abuse video. Is that who you voted for? So you got like 3 days of then getting these people in, and then listen to the way that she introduces these. So even when it's not like that, when she's got the main press corps in, the person at the side has this seat where they get the first question, and they are always like an influencer. Listen to how she introduces the influencer. This is the press of the White House now.
Is here offering his time, so we encourage you to ask him questions. We'll start with our new media seat today. As always, Rogan O'Hanley, former Hollywood entertainment lawyer, I didn't know that, Rogan, who got fed up with the far-left ideologies of California and now posts conservative political commentary online for his more than 7 million followers across all major platforms. He joins us today from the great state of Florida. Why don't you kick us off today, Rogan?
Thank you, Carol.
So she's just basically given not only a seat to this guy, and selected this guy as like a far-right influencer or right-wing influencer. She's then basically given free advertising, said how wonderful he is. She would never say that about freaking Caitlin Collins from CNN. This is despicable, honestly. And you wonder why they're tumbling in the Press Freedom Index, where they are generating people to ask them questions that they want to hear. They are just reinforcing the media ecosystem that got them voted in, reinforcing it to then get them, allow them to stay in power.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me the honor to be able to ask a question and provide some transparency for the American people. Speaking of, I wanted to reference the election integrity.
So this is like a press briefing. I mean, it's half empty, but of just like right-wing influencers that they've selected in there. So just to go back, globally speaking, when we talk about Russia's influence on the world, and the propaganda influence they have and the disinformation influence they have, we also see countries like the US like sort of aligning themselves with Russia and then also just destroying their own press freedom, just willingly destroying it. It's deeply disturbing. So anyway, that's a bit of a worry. That's enough from me. Take care. Let me know what you think, and I'll speak to you soon.